Hey, Mike, I can't see clearly. Is that a lightning bolt on your shirt?
You're damn right it is, Oteil. This is Section 119. Hey guys, we just got our hands on some great new gear from an officially licensed partner of the Grateful Dead, Section 119.
Oh, yeah, Section 119. They sent me a pair of board shorts. They're actually really cool. I actually wore them on stage, and they were really comfortable. You know, I live in board shorts in Florida, so that's kind of my jam. And these have a cool print on them. Bertha's on there and the roses and stuff. I really like them.
I got one of the performance polos with the Grateful Dead bolt embroidered in the chest. It's super stretchy, and I love the way it feels when I'm on stage wearing it. I feel like I'm representing the Dead and rocking out some jokes in style.
Section 119 was started by a couple of fans who wanted more than a lot tee to show their appreciation for the Grateful Dead. They started an apparel line that has everything you can imagine to represent the band at every occasion.
And not just the Dead, they've got some amazing fish duds as well. From button-downs with dancing bears all over it to board shorts with super vibrant prints and donuts all over your shirts and socks. They've got something for every fan for any occasion.
If you're looking for more than a t-shirt to celebrate the Grateful Dead, the folks at Section 119 make the highest quality apparel.
Boogie on over to section119.com and use code COMESATIME. That's all one word, comes a time, for 15% off your next purchase.
Hey, this is Oteil. If you're liking what you're hearing, head on over to patreon.com/comesatimepod and get your bus pass for an extra episode every week.
Welcome to Comes a Time. I'm Oteil.
I'm the other guy, Mike, a.k.a. Veal Cassidy, a.k.a. Tripowitz. We had a big one.
Yeah, we did. This, I can't believe I actually pulled this off, but we're going back into UFO land, folks. The guy that has done really my three favorite documentaries ever on the UFO subject, but his latest one, The Phenomenon, is unquestionably, it's just by far the best, in my opinion. His name is James Fox, and what a conversation we had. I mean, this guy has talked to 3 U.S. presidents, generals, and military people from all over the world. Astronauts, like personal conversations with them. And he just has all the goods. And I can't believe it. When I wrote him, and then I guess he was walking with a friend who's a Deadhead, and I guess like, maybe the Dead came up, and he was like, "Yeah, some guy, Dead company, come in." I think his friend was like, "You got Oteil's phone number? Like, can we call him right now?" So they call me, and his friend is like freaking out. So, and I'm freaking out. And so it must have been interesting for James Fox as both being sides of people. Yeah. Just like,
totally. Well, he was just sitting there. He was just sitting there tugging on a maker's mark like a champ. And he was cool. He was cool, man. I've never seen him before. And it was kind of like awesome to, man, it's fascinating shit. And it's just such a fun topic that like has so much meat to be like discovered, you know? And I love that he was having, the thing I dug about this was he was like, all right, I'll tell you guys something I haven't said before. Multiple times. I like when people are like, fuck it. Yeah, I'll tell you this.
Yeah.
You know, we had a lot of those moments. So,
and I have not heard those things.
And you would know. You
know. Including his own personal UFO sighting. Because one of the things he talks about is just like, what an excruciating process it is. You know, physically, mentally, emotionally, everything. You're just taken to the edge. You know, he said, I go broke every time I do a movie, you know. And I'm just like, well, why? What drove you? Did something happen to you? And he goes, oh, you know, actually, I don't think if I ever told anybody this. It's like, great, we're getting a Comes a Time scoop from the baddest director in the whole genre, you know.
And did you get what I was saying towards the end, where it's like with this genre, it could be chasing Sasquatch, it could be ghost hunters, it could be anything extraterrestrial. there's a large percentage of cheesy, not well done shit that waters down the market and almost makes people go, yeah, I mean, why am I going to watch a show about chasing Sasquatch? They're clearly not going to find it. You know what I mean? Like, but with what he put in the time, and he put in the money, and he put in the effort, and I mean, it's high quality content. And that's the stuff when you're in a world where there's so much crap, like comedy, like music, like all the stuff. I mean, you know,
religion, everything.
Yeah. When quality is what makes it, that's important. And I have to say, Oteil, you're with the golden background there. You almost look like that's some like very Sun Ra looking background you have there, like that gold foil,
like Buck Rogers from the old when the spaceship used to be on a string, you know,
like spray painted tinfoil. It was like, woo.
Oh man,
this was fun, man. Yeah, I hope you guys enjoy it, and I had a blast. And thank Oteil, I'm stoked you had him here. You got him.
What a long shot, and I will say, man, do not miss this one, and for sure to be continued. And you know, we got so lucky with Avi Loeb, and then our luck just was like even more with John Greenwald. And now this is just like a triple play. Like, I literally can't believe it, man. I wish Kofi was live right now. He would be losing it, man. So don't miss this one. This is really some heavy stuff for those that have only heard the trashy stuff. This is the real stuff, man.
Yeah, and also maybe we should say we'd like to welcome all of our new listeners that are coming from the UFO space. Check out some of our old episodes. They all get pretty heady. So, we spread a wide net. So,
yes.
And you know what would go well with this episode, Oteil, is a pre-rolled Garcia handpicked cannabis joint, our sponsor. So if you live in a place where, your powers that be have decided that cannabis is a legal thing, there's a good chance that you might have Garcia handpicked available for your enjoyment. They have gummies that are shaped like guitar picks. They have incredible craftsmanship with the packaging and the jars and all awesome stuff. And they actually have a playlist that goes with the brand of bud that you're smoking. So if you're enjoying an indica, there might be like a 75 crazy fingers, 76 crazy fingers, 73,
it has a little cannabis sommelier.
Yes, exactly. It pairs well with a John Kahn solo. So anyway, check out GarciaHandpick.com and find out if it's available in your area. Thank you for sponsoring us. We're very proud to be part of your team. You can check us out at patreon.com/comesatimepod. We are on Patreon. We have an incredible pile of holes for you to step into. I've got some stand-up dates coming up that we're going to post up there. Thank you for Osiris for having us on the network, osirispod.com, to check out all the great podcasts. And be sure to check out Safely Dead & Company with my friend Oteil out on the road.
And this whole series, I guess we could say this is a new season. On the road, on tour.
I'm enjoying.
Whatever.
Yeah.
Is this season 2? I don't know what season.
Yeah, but this is like season 2A with you on
season
the road.
2A.
You know what I mean? We're going to have a different background. We're going to see the curtains of American hotels.
It'll be the hotel background. Sorry, I don't have my cool backgrounds, and I also have to make sure that there's nothing identifying the hotel in the background.
Yeah, take the labels off cups and shit.
Yeah, but enjoy this, you guys.
Enjoy, peace, be safe out on the road.
Mask up, please.
Amen. What are you drinking, bud?
Little Makers.
On the rocks.
Yeah.
No, neat.
Nice.
It's neat. Yeah.
Okay. I started making these in the winter. during the pandemic, I found I had to get off beer because I was starting to look like fucking Santa Claus. But I bullet bourbon, ginger beer, rye bourbon, ginger beer, cherry juice on the rocks. If you want to throw a cherry or two in, you can. A couple ornaments on the tree, but that's the drink I'd made all winter.
I love it.
Got me through the pandemic.
I love it. Yeah. I was I edited The Phenomenon. I spent 3.5 years in an edit room and I couldn't walk at the end. And I had a number of different editors that were working with me. And this one guy was this fanatic on tea. And he kept saying, oh, we got to do this green tea and this other tea. And I said, how about some whisk tea? And so that was kind of like the ongoing joke because he wanted to give me tea. I had no interest in the tea. Yeah, so we had to say, how about some whisk tea?
Yeah.
That got me through.
Crazy.
That's how I met James. He was bombed on a full glass of Makers.
That got me through. That got me through the editing process for The Phenomenon. I'm not kidding. It really did, because
I can't imagine how just like mind numbing that is. Like, I've mixed records before, and I just can't do it. Just to be so micro on it, and I think, well, I know film is like that times 10.
Well, people would say, "Oh, I'm so excited you're doing this documentary. I can't wait to come into the studio and watch what you guys are doing." And they'd come in the studio and they'd be like,
You're like, I get another cup of whiskey.
Oh my God. Have you made any progress? I'm like, no, I'm still working on the first second.
Wow. Yeah, I can't. That would I'm just not made that way.
Every frame and every single word was carefully crafted. We would argue over a word one time for like 4 hours. To get the exact word, we'd look it up and check the definition and counter check the definition, look for synonyms, like,
oh my God.
synonyms, like,
So can I ask you a question? What's your origin story that would lead you to be able to have that amount of passion and focus? Like, what got you into all this stuff?
Well, funny enough, I don't think The Phenomenon would have, well, I don't know. You guys are musicians and you guys are artists. And when you think of, when you visualize a certain thing that you want to accomplish, whether it's a documentary or a song or an album, you kind of have an idea ahead of time. I certainly did of what it was that I wanted to create. And I wanted to do the seminal feature-length documentary film on the topic of UFOs for 27 years. And wow. I tried with my first production, 50 Years of Denial, which I sold to Discovery, fell short. Then I had another crack at it with a film called Out of the Blue. I spent about another 5 years making that. Peter Coyote narrated it, finished it. I wasn't happy, but a couple of my co-producers, one guy in particular, this guy Boris, was in a fetal position and he was having a complete meltdown. And his wife looked at me and I kept pushing because the film wasn't done yet. It wasn't done to what I wanted. And his wife looked at me and she was screaming at me, "You're killing my husband. Stop it. Like, stop it. Like, this movie's done. What are you doing?"
Hilarious.
And I realized, I was like, okay, well, all right, fine. So we put the film out of the blue, and you'll see why I'm telling you what I'm telling you. But in the back of my mind, I was like, this film isn't done. It was not the film that I set out to make. So 3 years later, I got a letter from NBC Universal, who had bought the broadcast option for the Sci-Fi Channel, and they said, we're not going to renew the broadcast option, so I own it again. So I was like, oh, great. This is awesome. So I'm going to take it. I'm going to do everything to this film that I didn't do, 3 years ago. I stopped doing. So I revisited the film project and everyone was like, you're out of your mind. So I had to buy my other partners out, get new partners. I put several more years into it. And then that evolved into another film, which I did an updated director's cut version of Out of the Blue. That fell short. Then I did another film I spent about 4.5 years on called I Know What I Saw.
Yeah.
That fell short. It was a decent film.
Yeah.
That one I worked really hard on, but I was not satisfied. You know what I mean? It wasn't what I wanted to accomplish. I just wasn't satisfied. And my dad would say to me, my dad was a writer. He was paralyzed from the neck down with multiple sclerosis. And he'd write a book. He would dictate to an automated voice activated tape recorder, and he would do that, and then he would say what he wanted to say, and then someone would transcribe those tapes, and then he would edit. And it was a very, very slow and I'm trying to think of the word I'm looking for, but anyway, it was a long process. Arduous. Thank you.
Yeah.
In any case, I remember complaining to my father when I finished I Know What I Saw, and I worked really hard on that film. And people were like, well, you can't make a documentary on a bunch of old retired military men standing at a podium. I said, well, Al Gore just made a documentary out of a PowerPoint presentation. So, anyway, I finished. I Know What I Saw. I ended up selling it to A&E. It broadcasted the 2-part special on the History Channel. And I was like, not once did I even smile. And my dad was like, son, what's wrong? I said, Dad, I didn't do it. He goes, what do you mean you didn't do it? But look what you did. And I said, yeah, but no, I didn't do it. This is not, So anyway, so when I finished The Phenomenon, I was in a ball crying, and I couldn't, the level of pressure, and your audience would eyes glaze over if I gave you all the details. It doesn't matter. But suffice to say, it pushed me to the point of where I completely broke down, both physically and mentally. But I got it across the finishing line, and it came out. And I said, I think I did it this time.
I think you did do it, man. Me and my brother have been fanatics about this stuff for decades. And to me, it's the pinnacle. Did you have like a sighting yourself? I mean, what got you into UFOs just as a subject originally?
It's really funny because I don't talk about this very often, but years ago, I dated a girl named Rachel Miller, and I was 18. She was 19. And she's like, oh yeah, my previous boyfriend is really into UFOs. And I was like, oh my God. I just wrote him off so quickly as a freak, like this, you must be great kind of thing. 2 years later, I was lying in bed with my then girlfriend, Lisa. And we both looked out the window at the same time, and it was a very large window to our right. And there was an object shaped kind of like an egg, not that big, about half the size of a Volkswagen Bug, an old one. And it was just sitting there kind of about tree level, and it was kind of pulsating a little bit. And she said, what the F is that? And I said, I don't know, but whatever it is, I get the feeling it knows we're looking at us. She said, me too. Closed the blinds. So I leapt up out of bed and I closed the blinds, and we were clutching each other in bed. And I don't know, we must have waited a couple of minutes. I'm not entirely sure how long. And she said, I wonder if it's still there. And I opened up the blinds and it was gone. My sister came home about an hour later, and it was at that point, it's about 1 o'clock in the morning. We told her what happened. And she's like, oh, okay. And she goes off and goes to sleep. Woke up the next morning, never talked about it ever again. Didn't tell my dad, didn't tell any of my friends. Lisa and I didn't even talk about it. So isn't that,
however many years later, look what you're doing.
Yeah. And so I get a text message. If my phone was here, I lost my phone. I got a text message from Lisa 20 plus years later, which is just recently, or 30 years later. She said, oh my God, I just watched your movie, The Phenomenon. Do you think there's any correlation between what we saw and why you're doing what you're doing? I said, Lisa, I don't know, but I've thought about that. I don't know.
Amazing.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
I just got she's married. She's got a 12, 13-year-old daughter. And she's like, I just watched it. And I was thinking about us. And had I not had a witness on that event, and it wasn't like I saw definitively something from another world. Absolutely not. I saw something in the air that was pulsating. It was hovering, and I had the impression, as did she, that it knew we were looking at it. That's what I saw.
Let me ask you this: because this is not far away. Did it make any sound? Because we thought we saw a UFO. I had the most fun experience with my kids over the pandemic. Well, it might have been right before, actually. Anyway, my wife was out having dinner with friends, and we thought we saw a UFO. Now, it turned out to be a blimp at a football game, but it was big.
I remember that. I
remember. And my kids know that I'm really into this stuff. Nigel's last room was all his bike, everything, aliens and spaceships. So we went to chase it. I was like, well, Mom's not here. Let's be UFO hunters, you know. But one of the things that got me was its size and that I couldn't hear anything.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's why I even bothered to get in the car, because otherwise... and we live on a lake, so stuff flies over the house all the time. The smallest things. And they could be far away. They're so loud. You can hear it so clear. So to me, like when there's no sound and something's hovering, that's a dead giveaway.
So you made an interesting point, because I've interviewed a lot of people all around the world, to China and Africa and South America and Australia and all across Europe and stuff. And I met a lot of like military and civilian witnesses, but I sat down with a group of hospice workers that were sitting having tea in a garden on March 13th, 1997, the infamous Phoenix Lights incident.
Oh, yeah.
That massive UFO flew over. It started in the north and worked its way down across the state of Arizona. And in fact, it started in Nevada. And this has always baffled me, because I interviewed all 5 of them and they were having tea, and they said that suddenly they looked up and there was this object that they said it looked like a floating city, and it floated quietly. They said, had we not looked up, we wouldn't have heard a thing.
Wow.
It floated right over the top of them, and it took us several minutes. And they said they could see compartments and metal structure and lights. I swear to you, is what they told me. And it just floated right over them. And then it goes over the top of them. And what do? They go right back to having tea. I said, well, wait a minute. Didn't you get in your car and go chase after this thing?
Cell phone camera?
No, just anything. And I think what happens is your brain can't process what you're looking at. And it's almost like, I'm just going to go ahead and just pretend that didn't happen, because they all went back to having tea, and I just couldn't believe it. I mean, I was, but I've heard that many times from witnesses.
Who's the guy with
can't process. They can't process it.
Yeah.
Yeah. There was a dude that was a researcher. His name, Ted Williams, that was trained by Hynek. Anyway,
yes.
Is it Ted?
Not Ted Phillips. Ted. It'll come to me.
Ted Williams, right?
Is it? Well, is it the guy running his old organization now?
He was doing all the actual trace research, like if there was burn marks, and if he was at
Ted Phillips,
Marley Woods guy. And then that's kind of like Skinwalker Ranch. Anyway, I was watching an interview with him, and he said that he had an actual, anomalous sighting happen, and he had. He's like, I didn't take the picture because I was just like, just kind of transfixed. Yeah. And then he got one bad one or something. He's like, oh, I should, get this. I think it just freezes you, know. But there were tens of thousands of people that saw that one, right? The Phoenix Lights.
Oh my God, are you kidding me? Half the state of Arizona, because they're all out under the night sky trying to get a glimpse of the Hale-Bopp comet.
And Fife Symington faked the whole thing and then admitted it later. Yes. I was like,
I got Fife Symington to come forward, the governor of Arizona.
You're the one that did it?
I'm the one that got him to come forward.
Yes.
Yeah. I know.
Wow, I forgot that. Wow.
Yeah. And I'll tell you.
Nice.
I'll tell you how I did it. I was going.
Baker's Mark.
I know, right? Baker's Mark. I know, right? Good point. I did actually go out for drinks with him one night. I did. I had these 2 beautiful women with me, and I said, "Let's get the former governor liquored up a little bit and see what he'll reveal." Because
oldest trick in the book.
Always felt that he got a phone call from the higher ups telling him to shut it down. Because I don't know, the way the whole thing went down was just weird. But in any case,
he came out with that. For those that don't know, the governor. came out, he had to address it.
Yes.
And he said, we figured out what it is. And then they had someone come out in this stupid, like, life-size alien costume.
That was his chief.
It was like, yeah, ha, 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 little green men, just, nothing to see here.
Yeah.
That was their public statement. So then,
I was pissed off because I was interviewing all of his constituents at the time when this was going down, and they were really angry.
They were pissed too. They wrote him pissed off.
He went and he made an announcement earlier that day, and he was serious. He said, look, we're going to launch an investigation. We're going to contact the local Air Force Base, Luke Air Force Base, and all these other organizations, and we're really going to look into it. And he was serious. He really was serious. And then later that day, I think it was like 4 or 5 hours later, he had this unannounced press conference where he had his chief of staff dressed in an alien suit and made a joke about the whole thing, right?
Yeah.
His justification years later was everyone was freaking out and he needed to add a bit of levity to the situation. But I always suspected, because of his serious announcement of an investigation earlier that day, that he was that maybe he had a phone call saying, you need to squash this. That's just my, but he swears to me to this day. But in any case, I got him to come forward. I met with him. I'll never forget it. The same guy I was telling you earlier that was curled up in a ball. I pushed him really hard, and his wife was saying, "You're killing my husband." I got an interview with Fife, and I thought that, everyone's like, you don't have a snowball's chance in hell, but I always go for it anyway, right? But and he got back and he agreed to do the interview, and everyone's like, "Oh, okay." I think they were a little tiffed that I did get the interview. And what's he going to say? I said, "Does it matter? Like, let's go and meet with Fife Symington right now."
Yeah.
So on the way down to Santa Barbara, I was driving from San Francisco. I thought of one of the witnesses and one of his constituents, this woman, Stacy Rhodes. And I called her up, and I had my pocket tape recorder, and I said, "Stacy, you're not going to believe who I'm meeting with right now." She said, "Who?" I said, "Governor Fife Symington. Is there anything you'd like to say?" Ooh. She's like, "You're damn right. I'd like to say something to him." And I said, "Well, hold on. Let me pull out my pocket tape recorder." I pulled out. I pressed record, and boy, did she lay into him. I mean, respectfully, but she laid into him. I mean, it was like, wow. She'd been harboring all that for some time. So anyway, I get down to the interview with Fife, and I figured, I'm not going to lay this tape on him right now because he might just say this interview's over. So I just kind of felt him out a little bit, checked his temperature, got the interview going, got about maybe halfway through the interview. I said, "Governor, I have a little message from one of your former constituents, as well as a witness to the event, and she'd like to." And I did this all on camera. It's all the cameras were rolling when I did this. And I said, "She'd like to ask you something," and he kind of squirmed in his seat a little bit. Boy, it's been a while since I've been ambushed, kind of thing. and I said, and I pressed play, and there was Stacy Rhodes, just like, you let us all out there to dry. We've put you in office, and, we saw this thing, and you poo-pooed, made a joke out of it all, and really kind of laid into him. And he sat there very quietly, processed it. And I think right there on the fly, he said, "The hell with it." And he said, "You know what?" He just disclosed it right there. And it was one of those moments. He said, "Not only did I look into it, but I too saw that. And I'm a former Air Force pilot. And I know airplanes, and I'm a pilot." And he goes, "That thing was not from this world." And I said, "Well, how did you know that?" He said, "Because of the size and how it flew." Yeah. And I'm not just saying this. This is true. It was the first time in my life where I physically pinched the first thing I did was I looked over to the camera to make sure the camera was rolling. Make sure the red light was on. I'm not kidding you. I know. I bet. I was like, "There's no way this camera's rolling right now. I'm not getting this." And so then I reached and I said, it's a red light. Yeah, it says record. And then I said that I'm obviously dreaming. I'm not kidding you. So I pinched my leg in the field. I swear to you, I pinched my leg really hard. And I was like, "Love it. No, I feel that. This is really happening. I got this crazy, but this is the truth. I promise you," because I simply couldn't believe it was happening. That this big story, one of the biggest daylight sightings in modern history, and the governor was admitting that he saw it. It was like unprecedented. Of course, it was unprecedented. I mean, we were invited on Larry King like 6 times, and we went on Nightline and Dateline and Anderson Cooper, and
Well, it's just a great one for the debunkers too, because the debunkers always want to go, well, it could be a black budget project. Okay, so for something little like what you saw in 97,
yes,
I might even allow half for that. Just as my skeptic mind, like, come on, let's be rational. Something the size of what happened in Phoenix, where that many people saw it, there is absolutely no way we have some secret. We would be ruling this whole planet. We would have told the Saudis to just fuck off. We don't need your oil. Like, get out of here.
I interviewed families that were sitting on their front lawns. I'm not kidding you. I interviewed these families. One of them said, I just laid down on my back and looked up and watched this massive thing float over so slowly that it looked like it was going to land.
With no sound.
You couldn't see the edge. They said they couldn't see the edge in any direction. That's how big it was.
And no one has.
It passed over for several minutes. Look, I'm not saying this. The witnesses are saying that. I was like, I documented it. It's unbelievable.
No one took a picture.
I'm sorry?
Not one person snapped a photo.
No, there's video and pictures, right?
Yeah, there are some videos, but not up close like that.
The thing.
Okay, so I'll tell you a story about. I go after things big time when I hear. I stick my teeth into something I don't let up. I got contacted by a guy who was a Vietnam vet. Well, I'll back up a moment. There was a councilwoman, Frances Barwood. She was one of the few people, officials in Phoenix that pushed for a public investigation on this sighting. She was raked over the coals. Her career was destroyed. Frances Barwood, you can look her up. Frances was contacted. I was interviewing her at the time, all on camera, back in the 90s about this. Well, Frances, and this is a true story, and I may have never shared this story before publicly. I don't know, but it happened. Frances was contacted. She was called by a lot of people. They were demanding an investigation. She was contacted by this one guy in particular, and he's like, "I'm a Vietnam vet. I was on my roof with a tripod and a camera and a walkie-talkie. I was listening. I was trying to get a good photograph, good video footage of the Hale-Bopp comet, and I was listening to the truckers coming up Interstate 10 from Tucson. So Tucson, and I think he was either he's in Phoenix or he's in Tucson, and he heard it coming from Phoenix to Tucson or Tucson to Phoenix. I think it was Tucson to Phoenix, but don't quote me on that. I'm not sure. It was going one way or the other. But he was on his roof, and he heard the truckers on Interstate 10 talking about this massive craft. He's like, that's coming my way. So he filmed it with a tripod as it went right over the top of his house. Wow. So he called Frances Barwood and he said, hey, my name is so-and-so, and I am wanting to know if you're interested in some footage of this craft because I videotaped it. It went right over my house. And she was like, yeah, yes, I'd love to see it. So they made arrangements. He was going to drop the footage off at her office. Well, according to Frances Barwood, he didn't show up. So about a week goes by, and he calls her office and he says, well, what do you think? She goes, what do you mean, what do I think? You were going to come over to my office and you didn't show up. He said, well, I didn't have to. You had 2 men from your office come to my house. And she goes, I didn't send anybody to come to your house. Well, he goes, well, they said they were from your office. And the only thing they asked him, and I verified this at the time, is, and I didn't share this in any of my movies because it's one of those things, right?
Yeah.
But I'd heard it enough times where I think probably after 10 years of hearing similar stories, I said, okay, there's clearly some government aid, and I sound crazy saying this, but I know that's why I don't include it in my movies, but where clearly there's some unknown government agency monitoring this stuff. I'll give you another example. I was filming the phenomenon in Silicon Valley with Jacques Vallée and Gary Nolan, who's a macrobiologist at Stanford. And they were doing sample analysis of reported UFO debris that Jacques Vallée has captured from all across the globe. Yeah. And Jacques was walking around, I kid you not, the lab like this with the metal parts, all the little samples. And I looked at him, it was only me, the couple camera guys, an audio guy, and Gary Nolan. And I'm like, there's nobody else here. Jacques, what are you doing? Like, put those things down. And he said, and Jacques Vallée is like the intellectual heavyweight on the planet. I mean, he's a physicist. He mapped out Mars for NASA back in the 60s. I mean, the guy's a genius. And he goes, these things have a strange way of disappearing. And he was serious. And
he's I put my hands on him.
Yeah. And so if I had $1 for every time I'd heard those stories, and I don't include them in the movie because it makes me sound nuts, but I'm telling you, if you have a really good, legitimate piece of footage, chances are, make copies.
It makes you wonder how.
Make some copies and put them in many areas.
What about other countries? Are other countries at that same, like, if someone shoots something in Argentina, is the Argentinian government now going to sack that footage, or is the American government going to?
I would say a turning point for me in even speaking publicly about what I'm sharing with you gentlemen right now is when I was in Brazil and I was interviewing. I'm actually going back to Brazil in a week for the 4th time. It's the Roswell of Brazil. It's the 1996 Varginha UFO incident. And I was interviewing a number of eyewitness testimony that came within 10 feet of this being.
Wow.
Very credible broad daylight stuff. And there were 3 girls coming back from work or something. It was in broad daylight. They got within 10 feet of this thing. And the mother, it's a crazy story. I got a film coming out next year about it. But the mother, who I found very credible, on camera said that these men in suits showed up at her house. There were 3 of them. And 2 spoke Portuguese, and then the 3rd didn't. And I said, oh, well, who was the 3rd? They were in suits, and they were very, forceful, didn't threaten her directly, but they were intimidating. And they were offering the mother a briefcase full of money to basically say the daughters were lying, that what they actually saw was something different. And then it was all a lie, and the mother refused. And they said, "There's enough money here. You can leave the country and live somewhere else." This kind of thing. And at that point, I said to myself, "Okay, I think I've heard enough. I think I actually believe that these men exist." And I don't know what agency they're from, but they're global, because I'd heard similar stories when I interviewed a Belgian general. Who that very famous case in the late 80s, early 90s, Wilfred de Brouwer, General Wilfred de Brouwer, who told me to my face that men in suits showed up and they wanted to confiscate the radar tapes from the jets when they scrambled the jets to intercept that big triangular-shaped UFO over Belgium back in the late 80s, early 90s. And he's like, well, I can make copies for you guys if you provide me an official request. And they wouldn't do that because there's a paper trail. But then I interviewed Parviz Jafari, who was an Iranian general, and he told me the same thing when after that dramatic 1976 UFO encounter over Tehran, Iran. I interviewed him, and he said the same thing. There were representatives from the U.S. government in Tehran the next morning. So it's like, sure, this ATIP program, that was revealed on the front page of the New York Times in 2017 is cool. But I knew that there was an investigatory branch of some unknown agency in the U.S. government investigating these things, because I spoke to all the people in different time, 80s, 70s, 80s. I'll give you another example. I'll probably bore your audience to death at this point, but I was interviewing Colonel Charles Halt, who was a deputy base commander of Bentwaters UFO incident of December 1980.
Rendlesham.
An unknown government, it was a landing case. An unknown government agency came in and not only subjected this is what he told me. I'm not telling you guys. This is what he told me. He was a deputy base commander, that there was an unknown government agency from the U.S. that came in, sanitized the evidence, subjected his men to sodium pentothal, and like sanitized the area and left. I was like, well, what agency were they from? He goes, I don't know, but they came in like they own the place.
Really? They were able to even get in. You bring up something that's really puzzled me because, I hear these people that have had this happen and have actually been threatened. Like one of the guys who was, when they tried to shoot the dummy nuclear warhead out, and the guy who was in charge of the cameras.
I think he was in Air Force Base, 1965. Yeah.
And he got mad. He goes, I don't give a damn what anybody says. I saw it and all your threats and whatever. Yep. So I thought, okay, so how are all these guys disclosing this stuff? Why are some people threatened and some others? Like the science teacher in Africa. I mean, the principal of the school in Zambia or whatever.
Collins?
Yeah, the guy you interviewed and he hadn't been interviewed before. Or was it the science teacher?
That's Dr. John Mack from Harvard. You mean him? Or
No. It was the guy from the school in Zambia, I thought.
Oh, yeah. Zimbabwe.
Zimbabwe.
Yeah.
And he was like, I was threatened. All these kids saw this thing. And how come some are threatened and some aren't?
Yeah. So it's interesting, actually, because Colin Mackey is his name. He was headmaster. He's really funny. He has not... He denied me a request for an interview, as did Judy Bates, who's now the headmistress of Ariel School from the 1994 UFO landing case in Rua, Zimbabwe. And I managed to get Judy Bates. And if you watch the phenomenon at the end, very carefully, listen to my encounter with Judy Bates. Judy Bates had just had face surgery for some cancer.
I know. She had that thing over her nose.
And she walked out just to say hello to her former classmates, right? Or former students. And all of a sudden, the cameras were rolling somewhere else. All of a sudden, she starts talking. And I said, Judy, do you mind if I turn the cameras on you right now? She's like, well, I don't know what I'm going to add. Roll camera. And she pretty much admits very discreetly that she was a witness to that event. But you have to listen very carefully. But I couldn't get Colin Mackey to go on camera, and I don't know why. But he wouldn't say no. I could see that the message was read, and he would respond to every other question I'd ask. But when it came to an actual, will you meet with me interview, he wouldn't respond. And I don't know why. So it's interesting. You're saying that he was asked not to or whatever. Maybe that's true. I don't know. But Colin, and then there was that landing case that happened at Westall in 1966 in Australia, and everyone there was threatened. They didn't threaten their lives; they threatened to destroy their reputations.
I just wonder, because some people, it just seems to me, and I'm sorry because it's my conspiracy brain, but it seems like all of a sudden, all these people came forward. The Hastings disclosure, the Greer disclosure at the National Press Club. And all of a sudden, everybody felt free to talk about it. And at first I thought maybe they're getting cover from the Rockefellers, because I know Lawrence Rockefeller was working with Clinton to try to get a disclosure. And then wasn't Stephen Greer working with David Rockefeller? So my brain was going, maybe because they're powerful, they provided some cover, which may be bullshit. I don't know.
So Lawrence Rockefeller, basically, I know this because I've done a good amount of research on the Rockefeller Initiative. It's referred to as the Rockefeller Initiative.
Yeah.
Lawrence was putting a lot of money at this in the 90s, early 90s. And whoever won the presidency was either going to be Clinton, who is that? Ross Perot or
George Bush Sr., right?
George Bush Sr., thank you.
Yeah.
And he had basically made up his mind, Lawrence Spellman Rockefeller at the time, that he was going to put significant pressure on whoever won the presidency, because in his twilight years, he wanted to push for government transparency on UFOs. So he basically approached the Clinton administration and he was like, look, you're going to do this. And if you don't, I'm going to reveal the fact on every newspaper cover that you're not going to do that. Basically strong-armed Clinton. We look into it. He's like, look into Roswell. So they looked into Roswell, and he went and they went after it. But Lawrence, paralleling that effort, he was also funding Dr. John Mack. He was funding.
Really?
Oh yeah, he sent Dr. John Mack to Africa, and that was what funded all the cameras that interviewed all the children in Africa in 1994 after that landing case. Fascinating.
Really?
Oh yeah, but he was doing all that, and he put together the briefing document. You know that briefing document? Briefing document. I've got a copy of it somewhere. In fact, the fact that I don't have it right here makes me a little worried.
So I was right.
Yeah. And so Lawrence was like putting a lot of pressure on. Lawrence actually got probably that coupled with, the 50th anniversary of Roswell, which was 1997. And there was a lot of media attention. There was Stephen Schiff, the Congressman Schiff. He died under mysterious circumstances. Boy, that was weird. The Roswell thing was weird. Yeah. You want to talk? I mean, that just looked weird.
Thanks for listening. We'll be right back after this. What's up, everyone? I'm Mike.
And I'm Oteil.
And these are our Sunset Lake CBD gummies that are almost gone. Sunset Lake CBD is a farmer-owned business that ships CBD products directly from their farm to your door.
For years, Sunset Lake was a Vermont dairy farm producing milk for Ben & Jerry's ice cream. In 2018, they diversified and started growing hemp for CBD.
And with a product for everyone, they offer pre-rolls, hemp cigars, and hemp flowers, as well as tinctures, gummies, and CBD crafted coffee to help with stress, aches, and pains.
Sunset Lake CBD saves you money by shipping high-quality CBD products directly from their farm to your door.
Want to know what I've been using a lot of, Oteil? This salve with the arnica on my old bones. You get back from a show and you got tore ankle, rub a little bit of this on there. You're ready to dance the next day. And Sunset Lake comes a time listeners can visit sunsetlakecbd.com and use promo code TIME for 20% off of their purchase. That's sunsetlakecbd.com, promo code TIME. And tell them we sent you.
Thanks for listening.
But that's what gets me. Like, some people die. They don't just get threatened. And then all these guys, this slew of guys, felt free to come forward. Like, I get the deathbed ones. I get that even the guys that are really old, like Colonel Corso or some, and they're like, whatever, I could say what I want. Like the guy in Israel, right? The head of the Israeli space force. I'm 80 something. Yeah. I'll say what I want. But, some of these younger people, I'm like, well, how did they feel free to come forward? So it's just my conspiracy brain, but that's interesting.
Power in numbers. I wonder also, I'm just trying to think of how much I can reveal here, but I
love when we what? We wish we were there with more makers.
I know, right? I know.
I think I've said two things this whole podcast. I have to be careful what I say.
Because I've gotten a little bit of an access point that I can't abuse.
Yeah. Anybody shows up at my house tomorrow, I'm not doing it.
No.
I have a dog that'll bite.
But one of the questions that I have, and I put this forth to Senator Harry Reid, the former Senate Majority Leader, is like, who has the authority to release the good evidence? Like,
it's not the president.
No, it doesn't seem to be the president.
Well, right, because he's a temporary employee, right?
Yeah.
He's basically
it's really baffling to me, and I haven't gotten a straight answer. And I've asked that because I really want to know. I want to know. I really do. I mean, I've talked to Podesta about it, talked to Senator Reid about it. I've talked to former Deputy Secretary of Defense for Intelligence, Christopher Mellon, Lou Elizondo. Like, I don't know. In fact, no one's given me a damn answer on that one.
Well, let me ask you a question with that then. You know how right now it seems like there's this trickling, there's a dash of information here. There's a dollop of information here.
Yeah.
And that's supposedly enough to suffice. Like,
Can you imagine the videos they have?
That's what I'm saying. So it's like,
I've heard.
Do you feel like they are like, you know what, when Yellowstone explodes or when something else happens, this is when we'll drop this information? Are they saving it for literally the catastrophic event to go? And by the way,
well,
here's some video from.
Here's what I think, and this is informed speculation, but I can't sit there and tell you definitively one way or the other. Here's what I think. You've got some people in the intelligence agencies that want this out and others that don't. And the reason why they don't want it out, because it exposes their vulnerabilities. It exposes what they don't know. Right. It opens up the floodgates to all these questions, because do we know their origins and intent? I don't think we do. You know, and I've asked, like, because I want to know. I'm just a Joe Public guy that's just been incredibly curious. Like, I really want to get to the bottom of it, and I'm starting to realize maybe I won't get to the bottom of it, and it's really hard to say. You know, like, but maybe the best response I've gotten is that there's an omnipresent intelligence that has the ability to manifest itself in a multitude of ways. It's psychic, it's physical, it's nuts and bolts, and yet it's not, and it's around us all the time.
Sounds like God.
I know.
This is why the ancient aliens thing becomes very plausible.
But that's, look, am I saying I believe that? I'm not saying I believe it. I'm not saying I don't believe it.
See, that's important. That's important. We had Avi Loeb on, and he's talking about how all of his colleagues in this, metaphysical space and in physics, and they need to have more of a childlike approach to this field, because we don't know, just like what you said, like, and that sometimes is the most beautiful answer, right? So why is the government so scared to show their vulnerability? Why is that's, I think, the deeper question,
Yeah, they can't say that. It's fear. They can't admit they don't know, because you got to admit you're not the top dog.
Absolutely.
And that's military supremacy is military supremacy. Either you're supreme or you're not.
And
we're not.
That's exactly it.
Supremacy.
Yeah. That's exactly it.
Yeah.
I interviewed a Brazilian general, Air Force general, Jose Carlos Pereira. And he said exactly that. He's like, no governing body is going to admit their weaknesses and their vulnerabilities and what they don't know. That's just not in their nature. They can't do that. You're not going to tell them, by the way, there are structured craft of unknown origin whizzing around with impunity. We don't know who they are, where they come from, what they want, and they fly rings around our fastest jets. Shall they turn to be hostile? They can annihilate us in about 2 seconds. You know what I mean? Like,
and they're also telepathic, so they can read your mind. By the way, you know what I mean?
Like, yeah, exactly.
I mean, even you guys, even you and your former girlfriend had this telepathic. See, I'm fascinated by that part of it too, man. The whole
that was the part that was so weird, because I think that if I wasn't with someone, I would have probably never spoke about it ever again. The fact that I was with this girl, Lisa, and she remembered exactly like I remembered it. And the fact that she even texted me she texted me like, I don't know, 5-6 months ago. And she's like, oh my God, I kept thinking about, maybe something to do with what you're doing now has to do with our side. I don't know. I have no idea. I really don't. I don't. And I really would like to know. I'm going to Brazil in a week. I'm going for a 4th time, and I'm meeting with some military guys and some civilian witnesses. My partner, Rebecca, she's like, kind of where, she's like, honey, I'm really worried about you going to get kidnapped. I'm like, I'm not going to get kidnapped. I mean, she's like, well, and then I started thinking, I am going over there to expose something they don't want to expose.
Hey, we got you on video right now. So if anything mysteriously happens to you, you'll be like,
I know. You think about it a little bit, not a lot.
Yeah,
a little bit. You know
what I think about is that
Jesus, man.
we're all in agreement that there are as many planets as grains of sand, right? Like on our beaches, right? So that means that we are one of an infinite amount of, options for interstellar, intergalactic beings to visit, right?
Yes.
But Earth's ego is so goddamn big. We think we're like the hot shit. I think personally, if the universe is a road trip from New York to San Francisco, Earth is a urinal at a rest stop in Jersey, and there's islands that it's raining diamonds and shit. Like, why do they want to come? We hate everyone's mad. If they could pick up on vibes and other senses, this is where Earth's where the poor aliens go. This is we're Ocean City or something.
See, what if if they were here first? We talk about our airspace, right? And I'm like, our airspace, it's like where we draw these borders.
Yeah.
If say they're here first, it's their airs, right?
Yeah.
I
got to share something with you guys. So it's I did an interview with Story Musgrave. He was a space shuttle astronaut. It's so funny because you interview astronauts, and first of all, it's such an honor to even be in the same room with someone of that, caliber. And I feel like a total loser when I'm sitting there. I just feel so unaccomplished and so under everything.
Yeah, right.
And I said to Story Musgrave, and I'll get to Edgar Mitchell in a second, who's the sixth man to walk in. I said to Story Musgrave, I was like, what were you doing when you weren't flying the space shuttle? He's like, oh, I was a brain surgeon. This guy's got more degrees than a thermometer, right? I mean, it's like, and you can just see it in his eyes. Like this, I've never been in the presence of someone so accomplished and so driven.
Yeah.
And he had this look in his eyes. But he said to me, he would study the Earth. He'd go around and around the planet. And he would look at the Earth and he would see all these invisible borders and all the different wars and all this. And he was like, why on earth? First of all, he's like, the universe is teeming with life. There's no question about it, period. He goes, but why on earth do they want to establish contact with us? We're so hostile. We can't get along with each other. Like,
that's what I'm saying.
The way he said it was so articulate, and he's went through the whole thing. I was like, oh my God, that's so true. Of course, none of that interview made it in the film, and you know how it goes. But
Native Americans had a term for mental illness, and it basically translated to mine, me, I. Like, it was like they didn't have an idea for when settlers came and said, this is our land now, you don't cross over this line. They're like, oh, they have that mental illness. Like, they have the border illness, the selfishness, and it's interesting to think about that. It's like, airspace and all this shit. Every time I hear that, I'm like, what the fuck does that mean?
I know. You guys, I got to share this interview. I sat down with Edgar Mitchell, Apollo 14, sixth man. I idolized that man. And we were doing an interview. He'd written a book called The Way of the Explorer that touched on some of the meetings he'd had with high-level military and government officials regarding the UFO phenomenon, blah, blah, blah. We're talking about that. And in the middle of the interview, I said, God, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry to ask this of you. But what was it like to walk on the moon? I'm serious. I felt really bad because I was like, I'm sure he gets asked that question all the time. But I just had to know. I just had to know. So I was like, what was it like? And I was like, oh God, and he sat there and he goes, oh, James, if you'd like me to tell you, I'll tell you. So I was like, yeah, please, So I closed my eyes. And he told me every aspect from the translunar injection where they go around the planet and then they get the trajectory and the coordinates just right. And they put the blasters on. It's called a translunar injection. Translunar injection. They go from the Earth to the moon and they have to get the trajectory just right. And then they shut the power off, and then they basically just cruise, right, for 3 days to get to the moon. And if they get it off, they either hit the moon and explode, or they ricochet off the moon and miss the thing and then go off into space, right? It's like, it's got to be perfect. I swear to God. That's what he told me.
That's a pretty easy 3 days, huh?
No pressure or anything.
No pressure. Just get it right. You're dead. And anyway, he goes, I might as well have been in a simulator because I was so caught up in the moment of all the calculations and everything that I just didn't really have time to reflect on what I was actually doing. And then it was his job to separate from the lunar orbiter, and he did the coordinates for the lunar lander, and he landed the lunar lander on the surface of the moon. And once the landing had occurred, he said that everything went so quiet, like it was so quiet. And he said, there they were. They'd been up for 3 days, and NASA was like, get in your hammocks and sleep. So I think it was Michael Collins, but I'd have to look into that. They got into their hammocks and they were supposed to sleep, but they couldn't sleep. And they could hear these macrometeorites pelting the skin of the spaceship because it was so thin, right? They could hear these. Yeah. And I was like, oh my God, did you guys know that's going to happen? Anyway, they got too excited. They told NASA, screw it. We're putting on our spacesuits. We're going to go walk on the moon right now. So they, so they put their spacesuits on. He got on the surface of the moon, and he's walking around the moon, and he's kind of bouncing around. And he says he looks and he sees this blue marble suspended in this vacuum of space rise. It was an Earth rise. And he looked at this blue marble. It was Earth. Wow. And he saw this blue marble, and he said, you can't imagine the vacuum of space until you see the vacuum of space, the level of darkness, like this blue marble in this Earth. And he reached out with one hand like this, and he put one hand in front of the Earth, and he said he blocked out everything he knew, everything he knew, the entire planet. And he had this profound epiphany, which he spent the rest of his life trying to explain, trying to come to terms with, like, all the wars at Vietnam at the time were happening, and all the invisible borders, and he said that he really felt a very distinct sense of interconnectedness, not just with Earth, but with the cosmos and with the very molecules in the spaceship that was enabling him to try, he founded the Noetic Institute just to try to explain that epiphany that he had, that there was a deeper sense of connectivity with everything, one planet, one people, one cosmos kind of thing. And that just stayed with me. Like, I think about it every time I look at the moon. I think of Edgar Mitchell, and that moment, how fortunate I was to have that opportunity, to have that moment with a man who walked on the moon. And the fact that I get to share that a little bit with you guys today.
Yeah, thank you. That's a privilege, to hear that. Yeah, that's beautiful.
Oh, man.
And the result of it, too, because so much of our podcast is about having these experiences, whether you get it induced from psychedelics or whether you get it from meditation or religion,
hypnotherapy,
or playing
going to the moon.
African drums or going to the moon. He had a legit
or Maker's Mark
psychedelic experience, right? Without any of that, he hadn't slept for 3 days. He's standing on another planet. We know how the moon looks when it comes up big. And we're like, oh my God. Imagine on the moon and the Earth comes up.
I know.
Yeah. I mean, and he just had this experience. Then he founds the Noetic Institute to explore this experience, which I would call a spiritual experience, to like
totally.
And it's about connection. That's what this podcast is about. Connection, these experiences, how to get to those experiences. Like, if you don't even believe you can have one. Yeah. But like, we had a guy on named Stanley Krippner. He was like, everybody has psychedelic experiences when they dream.
Yeah.
So we all are wired for it. We're all wired for this connection. If we could get dialed into that frequency, and we maybe could, like, I think that's, and I think that's why the aliens are concerned with us, and don't destroy us because they're trying to help us. It's like your kids. You won't kill your kids. You're like, oh, dude, my kids could destroy our whole house, just burn it down.
See that,
right? But I'm helping them tune up for, I'm helping them.
So I got to share one thing with you guys, and we might be at time. I don't know how much time we have, but I can't reveal names here because I didn't get permission. But I was interviewing some scientists, and we're actually talking at a dinner, and they were talking about certain people that had the ability to make the connection with another intelligence, and these scientists had determined that the people that they were studying that had that ability had an extra antenna. He didn't use the word antenna, he used another more technical word.
Yeah.
But I said, what does that mean? He said, it's basically an antenna. It allows that person to pick up on what's already there.
Is it the caudate putamen?
Yeah, it might be, but the way he explained it to me in layman's terms, because I'm an idiot, but he basically said, it's around us at all times. Some people can pick it up because they have the receiver. And I was like, oh my God. Wow.
Yeah.
It's a frequency. I think a lot of musicians have it.
We've talked about that too, where like you're in a store or you're in a public place and you look at someone and you're like, that person straight up is not human. Like that person, like that's an alien right there. That person is an extraterrestrial in a skin suit. And they're just looking at, they're not blinking, like they're just looking at you funny, and you're like, yeah, that person.
Robotic.
Yeah, a little bit, a little too robotic. We've all seen them.
That's really funny. You should say that because here I am telling you guys things that I don't usually share. It must be the makers, but
fill them up.
Yeah,
2 fingers.
I did an event at the National Press Club with a woman, Leslie Kane, who's actually getting a lot of wonderful publicity lately for her incredible journalism, particularly with the New Yorker and the New York Times, and she's working on some other big things that are coming out next year. And I don't even think I told her this at the time because it was just too weird. And at the end of the National Press Club event, we flew in 14 high-level military and government officials from 7 countries. And we had testimony at the National Press Club. I made a movie about it called I Know What I Saw. And during the media break, after the presentation was done, I made eye contact with a guy that was on the other side of the room. And he had these big, and I never thought about this ever before, but he had these big piercing blue eyes that were almost electric. And he looked at me from across the room. We made eye contact. And I said to myself, that guy doesn't look like he's from here. And it was just like, it was like that quick. And I never spoke to anybody about it. I didn't tell Leslie about it. I didn't talk to my sister about it. I didn't tell anybody about it.
Yeah.
About 2 years later, I met with, and I'll tell this, whatever, it doesn't matter. But I met with Robert Bigelow. Robert Bigelow got the contracts for ATIP. He's well, you know Robert Bigelow, right?
He owns Skinwalker Ranch.
Yeah, exactly. He owns Skinwalker Ranch, exactly. So Robert Bigelow's gotten a lot of government contracts. He's worked with the government. He's probably put more money. He's a billionaire. He put more money into the UFO. He's got involved with Elon Musk. He was putting these inflatable capsules into space for hotels or habitable zones. And he has also invested hundreds of millions of dollars into research into the phenomenon. He's got a vault with a bunch of evidence. And he reached out to me after he saw my movie and invited me to his house. We had dinner together. Nice. And he said to me, they're walking among us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, boy, I had a weird, but that's what he said. Do I believe him? I'm not saying I believe him.
Ingo Swann.
I don't believe him. If anyone was in a position, no, it would be him. But I'm not saying it's true. I'm not saying it's true because I don't know.
Right.
Hey, man.
He did tell me that.
Ingo Swann's book, Penetration. I've told our fans about it many times. Go get Penetration and read it or listen to it on Audible. And he talks about that, he ran to that lady in the grocery store. He just went next to her to the produce section because she was really hot and not wearing hardly anything. And then he just every hair on his body stuff. He got very, very afraid. And he realized, he was like, oh, she's not from here. And then he looked down the aisle and he saw the two twins. I mean, I'm talking, these are the Men in Black guys.
There really was a blue light special on aisle 15.
A red light special. But ever since then, and I thought, well, okay, because my mentor is this guy named Colonel Bruce Hampton, who freely admitted that he was part ET. He was very psychic. He used to freak people out constantly, guessing their birthdays right there. He guessed my birthday within 3 minutes of when I was born, man. He didn't know my freaking last name.
No way.
So I just was like, and I knew what time I was born because my mom was into astrology. So I was just like, I'm going to follow this guy. I was like, I don't know what's up with you. And he taught me to see them. He's like, he always said, I mean, our fans are probably tired of me saying this, but he said casinos and airports are the best place because there's so many different types of people they can blend in easier.
Really?
Right.
And, so you just got to go when you're at Newark Airport or if you're in O'Hare or something, like just scan. I would miss so much stuff, but I definitely do believe they walk among us.
I'm a guy that needs what I've learned after all these years is not to have that knee-jerk response, and I've had it many times where I just immediately dismiss something because it sounds too out there. And I've done it. I did it with Rua. I did it with Varginha. I did it with Sapporo. I did it with a number of cases. I just. To me, it's like, oh, come on. I have that like, oh, come on, And so I've learned not to just immediately embrace something, but to keep an open mind, review the data, review the evidence, and then make a decision because I've written things off really quickly that turned out I turned out to be wrong on many occasions. So now I just say, I don't believe it, but I don't not believe it. I need to see more proof.
Nice.
Well, can we talk about, I know you have, I would be fine to talk to you for 3 hours. I don't want to keep your time, but there's a couple of things.
How about a couple more questions? Then I'll go have dinner with my family.
Yeah, absolutely.
Does that sound good? Yeah. All right, good.
There's a couple of things that I want to, and you can cover them quickly. And these are for skeptics, because this was something that I went through to help convince myself that this was legitimate. Presidents and UFO.
Yes.
I would like you to go over briefly John Mack's story because he was from Harvard. And that I think it's really important for people to know, like, look, it's coming out now, the military people, generals, politicians. I'm really glad whether I trust totally their narrative or not. But for the presidents, astronauts, and this guy, John Mack, I think it's very important for people to get just a quick background on those three, if you don't mind.
So I've interviewed President Ford, briefly President Carter, indirectly President Clinton, through Podesta. And what I have learned is that inquiries have been made at the highest levels and they were not satisfied with the answers they were getting. That's not something I read out of a book. That's information I got directly or almost directly from 3 different presidents. So I was trying to get to Reagan and Nancy Reagan because there was a bunch of stories I was chasing down. And I was also trying to get to George Bush Sr. because he was former head of CIA. But you only do so much. It's like, it's amazing.
Well, he shut down Carter because Carter, when he tried to find out senior when he was head of the CIA, and he told him no.
I'd love to know what he knew.
Boy.
George W. Bush. I'd like to know what he knows. But in any case,
this goes back to Truman, right?
Yeah. Well, have you ever seen that FBI memo with Truman?
Yes. I think John
Greenwald. It was in, I think it was in July of 1947, in his own handwriting.
No, I haven't seen that one. No.
Well, hang on. Was it J. Edgar Hoover? No, it was J. Edgar Hoover. Sorry.
Yeah.
But that was because Truman was president when Roswell happened, right? 47.
Yeah, I think so.
So J. Edgar Hoover's own handwriting of Roswell, which was really, it's amazing. You can look it up. I actually got it at the time. I think I got it in the late 90s on the site, on the FBI's own website. It's in the film Out of the Blue. And he says, in his own handwriting, so it's not typed, it's in his own handwriting. He says, we will agree to it if we can have access to discs recovered. For instance, in the something case, the Army grabbed it and wouldn't let us have it for cursory examination. And signed J. Edgar Hoover. It's like, it's the most damning evidence I've ever seen, because it's in his own handwriting and it was on their site. I featured it. It's amazing to me how many people are not talking about it or following up on that one.
That's what I'm saying. The New York Times, it was right there for everybody.
Truman, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm sorry. I'm doing the best I can here. I believe we have on-camera footage from Truman after the 1952 UFO flyover 2 consecutive weekends in July of Washington, D.C., which was a phenomenal case.
Yeah. Anybody just go on YouTube and put in Harry Truman UFO. You will see the press conference.
Yes.
He says, we never have a meeting of the Joint Chiefs where it's not addressed.
Yes,
we're trying. Totally. And
exactly
as soon as we can confirm something, we'll let you know. So it's Truman, Eisenhower. I mean, it goes all the way up the line to now.
Absolutely. I was just speaking of my personal experience with presidents, but yes.
Yeah.
That statement from Truman is very compelling. And that statement in his own handwriting right after Roswell from J. Edgar Hoover is also extremely compelling. It's like, if that's not a smoking gun, I don't know what is. The discs recovered, for instance, in the something case, people can't translate it because it's scribbled. In the something case, the Army grabbed it and wouldn't let us have it for a cursory examination. Well,
I bet it was Roswell case.
It had to be Roswell. It was like July of 47, as Roswell was in early July 47.
But what's that one right before Roswell? You covered it.
Oh, yes.
That was in Phenomenon.
That was
Ronnie Zamora. Is that him?
That was 64.
That's 65.
It was
I'm sorry. Blah, blah,
blah. No. There was Trinity at 45, but Jock covered it with Paola Harris. And I actually interviewed both those witnesses personally, and I found their testimony incredibly compelling. And that was a crash that happened within a few miles of Trinity site. I don't know. It was
close. Yeah.
1945. But I didn't include that in the film because I only had 2 on-camera testimonies from witnesses. They were both civilian. I didn't have any government documents, and I opted to leave that out of the film, whatever. But I did find their story very compelling. What was the other thing you wanted me to address?
Okay, the other one is astronauts, because I went on a little search for astronauts, and I found 8. 6 of them talked about it. Deke Slayton, put me on a different path because he didn't have his sighting when he was an astronaut. He had it when he was a World War II pilot.
James McDivitt, Mercury, I think it was over Hawaii. You'd have to look it up, Google it. But James McDivitt is the most compelling documented UFO encounter as part of the NASA astronauts because he not only saw this thing, but he took a photograph of it. And apparently the photograph that he took of it when NASA developed the film, because he saw the thing and he took the damn photograph. And when he developed the film, when NASA developed the film, they gave back, he's like, that's not what I photographed. But James McDivitt is the most credible, allegedly documented UFO encounter in space by an astronaut is James McDivitt. In terms of I interviewed Cooper. There's all these things on the internet about Cooper, I had this encounter with you. No, he didn't. He said, no, I didn't. He said, I had an encounter while piloting a jet over Germany. Yeah, I saw those discs. And I handed footage over of a landed disc at Edwards Air Force Base circa 1957 to higher ups. Never saw that again. But in terms of me having a sighting in space, that didn't happen. And I believe him. But James McDivitt is the most credible encounter that was documented photographically in space. I believe it was over Hawaii in the 60s, in terms of NASA astronauts. Now, have there been unusual things seen by Space Shuttle and the International Space Station? Absolutely. But in terms of NASA astronauts dating back into the 60s, the James McDivitt is the most compelling.
And I have not seen that one. And I've seen all the other. I've seen 6 that where they were on camera talking about it.
There's a documentary called UFOs Past, Present, or Future. It was done by Alan Sandler and Robert Emenegger in 1974. And that documentary, I believe, features testimony from James McDivitt. And
that one was sponsored by Richard Nixon, right?
I don't know who paid for that. I'm very suspicious, but I spoke to Stanton Friedman. Stanton Friedman, this is what he told me. I'm not saying I believe it or I don't believe it, but Stanton Friedman helped promote UFOs Past, Present, and Future with Alan Sandler and Emenegger. Emenegger had died, unfortunately, just recently. And he said, Alan's associated with the CIA. And I said, how do you know that? He goes, when they paid me, it came from a CIA thing. And Stanton Friedman's not like some paranoid, Stanton's a pretty level-headed, scientist.
He don't even believe Bob Lazar.
Yeah, I didn't even believe exactly, but he told me that. But Stanton Friedman told me that. So,
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. The other one is John Mack. I'm just super quick because his story is really
interesting
compelling.
Backstory with John Mack. So John Mack was a Harvard psychiatrist. He was approached by Bud Hopkins, who wrote about, would you call them Close Encounters of the Fourth Kind? It's when people claim to be abducted by aliens. That's what it is. Okay.
Right.
So I guess Bud Hopkins approached John Mack. They became friends, got him looking into the phenomenon. He's still associated, obviously, with Harvard University. John Mack is approached by Lawrence Spelman Rockefeller. He's funded his research because having the Harvard University label just kind of, I guess, made him way more credible. Harvard had a big problem with it. And Harvard basically, it involved Danny Sheehan, who's a lawyer. And
I love him.
And Harvard tried to get rid of John Mack because of his public association with the phenomenon. And, Lawrence Rockefeller stepped in and said, those grants you're getting from the Rockefeller Foundation? Well, yeah, you let that guy go and those grants are gone. I found that out.
Protection. Yeah. See, that's
Danny Sheehan had a role in that too. Apparently he stood up for, but it was the 90s and it was, UFOs were nowhere near as, I don't want to use the word ubiquitous, but things changed. In 2017, things changed. And I know that because I've been laughed at for decades and I've been the butt of people's jokes and ridiculed. That changed in 2017. I mean, I had some people that watched I Know What I Saw Out of the Blue, and they're like, oh, they had more respect for what I was doing. I was like, look, don't attack me. Look at the data. Look at the testimony. I've got nothing to do with it. I'm just reporting on it,
Yeah.
But things changed. But, at the time in the 90s, you got a Harvard psychiatrist who's talking UFOs and contact and abduction. I think Harvard just got incredibly nervous, and it just wasn't anywhere near where it is today. I mean, we know that UFOs are real. It's been admitted at the highest levels. They're saying they're real. They're saying they're probably not us, and they're probably not the Russians, and they're probably not the Chinese. So you can fill in the blanks on that one. But that's kind of a big deal. Everyone was like, this assessment that came out on June 25th. Oh, it's a big nothing burger. I'm like, man, I don't agree with that. I think it's actually a something burger. You've got the intelligence agencies providing this public report. I'd love to see the non-redacted version. Public report basically saying that UFOs are real. They're real. They're UAPs, and they're not us, and they're probably not the Russians or the Chinese. I mean, come on, man, that's kind of a big deal. Don't you think?
That's why you're on here, baby.
Yeah. And you know what else too? I'd like to say, as a filmmaker, you're in a pocket of content. Like, stand-up comedy goes from children's clowns all the way to Richard Pryor, right? And in filmmaking with this genre, it's the same thing, because you have these very cheesy, low budget, hokey things. And then you've got real information. And when you believe in the information and you're, you know, portraying it the way that you are, man, that's very important and very special. So, you know, it's just congratulations, but also like good work, man. You know?
Yeah, man.
Thank you.
Thank you,
all
guys.
the years of being ridiculed and
sticking with it,
man.
I mean, and that's, you know, that's good shit.
Oh. Thank you guys. No, seriously. I really, it's, you know, you forget, like, you do something, you put it out in the world, and it develops a life of its own. And you kind of forget that, you know, like I'll get contacted by people. Oh my God, thank you so much for, you know, thanking me for what? For that film you did. Oh God, thank you. That's nice to hear. It really, you know, when your music gets appreciated or something, you work, you push it out of the nest and you hope it flies, right? I mean, what can you do? And it was funny, actually, just like a couple of nights ago, I haven't watched the movie since I finished it. I have not watched my movie since I finished it.
I've watched it like 4 times.
I've not watched it since I finished it. Have you watched it on good speakers? It was supposed to be in theaters.
No, I didn't.
Oh my God. I was going into the bank and I was begging for a loan to pay for the, you know, for the sound mix, because you're always broke at the end of a long project. It's always, you push all in, you're at the poker table. It's just the way it is. Yeah. The way I've always been. Hopefully I don't have to do that next time. But in any case, everyone's like, oh, your movie's going to be in theaters. You had to have a 5.1 Dolby surround mix. You need to hire the sound engineer. It's like $100,000. I'm like, $100,000? Are you kidding me? Like, what? Oh, you have to do it. Your movie. People are going to get up and walk out of that theater not knowing what it was that was irritating them so badly. Got to have the good, you know, it's like, oh my God. So I found a guy, he's like, I'll do it for 50. I was like, $50,000 just for, that's not including the E&O insurance, the lawyers, the color correction, all the licensing fees. Like, you know, your movie's done and you still have to spend several $100,000.
Jesus.
Anyway, my point is we have a really good Dolby 5.1 surround mix. If you guys watch the movie, and by the way, if anybody watches it, rent it, just Google it, rent it for the cheapest price possible. If you buy it, get it from iTunes or Vimeo, because if you buy it on iTunes and Vimeo, it's the same cost that would be anywhere else, and you get 3 hours of bonus material for no additional cost. Yeah. And people always get angry when I don't tell them that, because why didn't you tell me I bought it on? And I said, people don't ask, but if you rent it, just rent it for the cheapest place possible. I think it's Amazon for $3.99. But if you buy it, get it from iTunes or Vimeo, because I put a package of 3 hours of bonus material for free. Like, you get it with it.
I got it on iTunes. I was checking all that out. It's really good.
You know.
Yeah, man. Well, look, we'll let you go eat with your family. Man.
Well, gentlemen, I really appreciate you having me on. I love what you guys do. I seriously really appreciate it very much.
Come back on and we'll talk more. And rye bourbon, ginger beer, and a little bit of maraschino cherry juice.
Are you guys coming to Vermont at all?
No.
New York?
Yeah.
When you guys come, can I stay in touch? I'd love to. I want to come hear you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm a stand-up comedian. He's the musician.
I want to hear you guys.
No problem.
Yeah,
we'll let you know. I'll text you for sure.
I'm in Vermont as often as possible. In fact, there's a club in Burlington I do as a bunch.
I mean it from the bottom of my heart. I want to come and meet you both.
Yeah, you're a cool dude, man. I want to hang with you, man. You're awesome.
I really mean that. I want to come meet both you guys in person. I really mean that.
Totally. Absolutely.
Freaking out. I love it. Bless you, brother, man. Have a great dinner.